Thank you very much, Dagmara. Our second keynote of the day is Frank Mischler. He's the Director of Policy and European Cooperation at PtX Hub Brussels, an organization dedicated to catalyzing defossilization globally. He previously supported climate diplomacy efforts at the G20 countries, and he's here today to talk a little bit more about what Dagmara already opened, building a hydrogen economy across Germany, Europe, and ultimately worldwide. Thank you, Frank.
Good morning, everybody. Indeed, I tried to connect to the speech of Dagmara, a wonderful overview of what the ambitious goals of Europe are, and talk specifically about the hydrogen challenge and how we ramp up this hydrogen market. I also see a connection of that speech to yesterday's keynote, because Mr. Wright already pointed out Shell's investment in hydrogen, and a lot of it was in Europe as well. So I hope that I can kind of deepen some of his points a little bit as well. And I also hope to be a precursor to Hardy Böckler's speech later on, who will talk more about the German approach. So hopefully that will work out and all links together. First, a quick word about who am I, where do I belong. So I'll be presented as PtX Hub. PtX Hub is the Center of Excellence for Renewable Hydrogen and Power to X within GIZ, the German Development Corporation, kind of an equivalent to USAID, right? So if you have that in mind, it fits well. We get our funds from the German government, from the European Union and other funds, and we take them as long as they support our overall mandate of sustainable development. We have offices throughout the world, traditionally, mostly in developing and emerging countries, and help them for decades on and every developmental topic. Energy is an important part of it, and in the recent years, hydrogen became more and more of an issue. So we are in all of those countries that are often seen as the future hydrogen hotspots of this world. Think Chile, Morocco, India, China, South Africa, Kenya, Namibia, the list goes on and on and on. So we support those countries. We do a lot of analytical work, a lot of training. We can talk about that in more detail. So what is it all about? Dagmara already said it very, very nicely. We have a huge challenge ahead of us. We talked about that a couple of times already in this conference, so I don't have to go into detail, but I want to really emphasize is that in that order as it's here. So our first order is energy efficiency, use energy more wisely, and then ramp up renewable energy as quickly as possible, and then electrify all sectors. We talked a lot about hydrogen in this conference, and it's sometimes one gets the idea that hydrogen is then the solution for everything, but I think it only addresses this last bit of those hard to abate sectors which we cannot electrify. And here the power to X comes in. So the same message, kind of in a different form. We do not replace oil and gas by hydrogen. We in fact replace oil and gas by renewable electricity, which is the huge yellow bar, and some of that, of course, that's the orange, will then be hydrogen. Just to show you kind of the dimensions, and I mean, even this orange bar, which looks so small and harmless, is enormous, you know, because this is on a 100% scale. Okay, we at the PtX Hub just want to stress the point that we are called Power to X and not Green Hydrogen Hub or something else. So we really see that hydrogen can really be integrated into the electricity market, be help for storage and for transmission, and then really help us for all of those end users that we are unable to electrify right now. So I think we had that yesterday as well. What are those big sectors? Aviation and shipping, decarbonizing industry. One thinks about steel, cement, glass, even the paper industry, ceramics, serve as a feedstock for chemical industry, for many, many products, even for things that maybe are not right in our minds, like cosmetics or paint. There are many, many use cases. And lastly, for decarbonizing building heating, but there's other use cases as well, like heat pumps, where you can use electricity directly. But those four are the things that we are most concerned with. Here we have the most difficult job to do. They're dominated by fossil fuels, aviation, shipping, steel, and chemicals. And just to make a little bit of a silly point here, well, technically the potential is there, no? So there is enough sun, enough wind on this planet. Hypothetically, it would be no problem. These numbers, by the way, are exajoules. The energy consumption of the United States is 94, 95 exajoules. So with the sun in the world, we can produce enough. So kind of case closed, all fine. Well, no. And I want to talk about the different barriers that we have and be more serious what prevents us from really building the hydrogen market right now, or in more positively spoken, what do we have to do? What we clearly have is the strong commitment, and that gives a lot of hope. We talked about hydrogen like 10, 15 years ago, but it was not supported as it is right now. All of those countries with the little flags have a hydrogen strategy. And this map, I think, is 6 months old, and you could already add more flags to it. And even some countries may not have a dedicated hydrogen strategy, but take hydrogen very, very seriously. So that includes, obviously, the US, but it also includes India, which wants to become a hydrogen superpower and technological leader. Last week, we had a delegation from South Africa and Brussels, and they had exactly the same talk of them being endowed with so much resources, minerals, but also renewable energy potential. And they also want to become a superpower. So does Brazil, so does Argentina. So there are more and more countries. This already tells you that hydrogen is very different from oil and gas. It can be produced by anyone and everywhere, and how best to do it, we'll get to it today. So now, my main part of this talk today, what are the barriers that keep us from developing the hydrogen market, and what do we have to address? I want to, the most fundamental, I mean, I said it already 3 times, but maybe it's worth saying it a 4th time, we need this massive, massive ramp up of renewable electricity. But then we have 6 items that I want to talk about today. Bringing down the costs, which also includes having more, removing regulatory barriers, which of course translate into cost as well. Picking up the pace of development, bringing down the cost of electrolyzers, being quicker in everything that we do. Ramping up demand, because without demand, we don't have business cases, we cannot build a market. At the same time, build the infrastructure. Dagmara already said that we shouldn't lose time because infrastructure takes a lot of time. Be innovative, invent all those technologies that we don't have yet, but we need to go to net zero by 2050, and the standards and certification. So I take those 6 in turn and talk a little bit around them, and then we can have a discussion. We don't have an awful lot of time, so I have to speed up a little bit. So what are the cost items that determine the cost of hydrogen? The most important is the renewable electricity. And I think everyone in this room has seen many, many graphs of renewable electricity, the cost of renewable energy going down since decades and very rapidly. So if you have further decline, we see hydrogen production also being cheaper. But then there is the cost of the electrolyzers. Here we have a lot of innovation, a lot of work being done, a lot of announcements. I heard an announcement from Chinese government only lately that really foresees a huge drop of electrolyzers. I haven't seen it yet in real life, but the announcement is there. So I think there's a lot of work on it, and we can expect that it will drop. where you need water, no? Well, you split water. Where does the water come from? In many places which have good solar potential, there's water scarcity, so you have to desalinate the water. That comes with a cost as well. CO2 you need for producing derivatives. Where does this come from? Often a huge problem that is overlooked. Direct air capture would be the best, but this is an enormously expensive technique, at least yet. With hydrogen, you have lots of conversion steps. Now, when I say hydrogen, in my head, I take it as a shorthand for all of the derivatives as well, no? For ammonia, for methanol, for all the kind of the real products that we then use. But these come with conversion. So you produce hydrogen, then you convert it to ammonia, then you put it on a ship, then you bring it to a port, then you convert it again. In every conversion step, you have efficiency losses and of course costs. And obviously the cost of storage, of transport, of distribution, and then taxes. So a lot of cost items that you all have to address to bring it down. Luckily, we are already on the way. So what I want to convey with this graph is that the cost curve of green hydrogen is dropping very quickly, and it drops even more quicker in countries which have a very good condition for renewable energy. Picked only 3 here: Spain, we will hear about it later today. I think they can talk to this, Saudi Arabia and Chile and Australia, which are kind of the best places for it. In this graph, in this projection, which is a year old, and it looks like a very distant past, they put cost parity to 2030. Now with the war in Ukraine, this has shifted. Now oil and gas is much more expensive, and so we may have cost parity already much earlier. I know that the colleague of Spain will talk about that. I think they put it to 2025 already, but let's see. And much is happening. So this is a super busy map of all the projects worldwide, 500 billion. And the interesting bit is that this comes from a study by McKinsey of February 2021. And at the time, they had 300 billion worth projects worldwide, and some 80 projects less. And only 6 to 8 months later, they had to correct it and bring out this new graph of now 360. And I'm very sure it's obsolete already, and it's much, much higher. So this just tells us we have a very, very dynamic market that gives hope, but kind of not hope enough. So the good story of this graph for me is those dotted lines. You see in 2019, the projection of hydrogen production by 2030 was 2.3 million tons per year. And only a year later, it had to be corrected, and it was triple the amount, 6.7. And only a year later, last year, it had to be corrected again, and it was double. So we underestimated every year very much the market ramp up, and I hope we do so continuously in near future, because otherwise we will not reach the goals that we have. You heard Dagmara talking about the Refuel Europe. On the 8th of March, this response to the Russian invasion and to get rid of the Russian gas. And one of the items was the hydrogen accelerator and the goal of 20 million tons of hydrogen per year, 20. So here it says 10 for the entire globe. So we have a lot of work to do. But I hope that with the speed of how we increase year by year, we'll get there. But it's a very, very steep curve and a lot of work. Okay, what is driving demand? 3 things. Policy, and here I directly link back to Dagmara's speech. So she was, I use European examples, forgive me, because I live in Brussels, so that's what's in my mind. But you replace it with other examples. But the the issue is, okay, how can we stimulate it with clear policy goals? In this Fit for 55 package that Dagmara was talking, there are very precise goals for the industry. I just put out 2 examples. There are many. This is shipping. Very clear goals up to 2050 with intermediate goals. What is the energy use of a vessel? Everything. I mean, the biggest part of it is the fuel. And this has to go down by 75% by 2050 with the intermediate goals that you see. And the solution, how it will be done, is up to the shipping industry. Will they use ammonia? Will they use methanol as their shipping fuel? It's up to them. But the direction of travel, it's very clear. So the market can organize itself and know, okay, these are the goals. And if I don't meet them, there are kind of hefty fines connected to it. Same for aviation. There's a kind of a double goal of aviation fuel from biosources, and the blue is power to liquid, so syncrude from kind of hydrogen. Doesn't matter too much here. The same messages as well. Okay, we very clearly have a goal, and it starts very slowly because this market is yet very, very immature. There's hardly any PTL in the market, but this gives a clear stimulus to the market. And there are many other goals of this sort in the European Green Deal for transport, for replacing gray hydrogen to green hydrogen, and so on and so forth. So this kind of set of policies gives a very clear guidance to the industry. The industry itself has to decide how to move on. Only kind of 2 weeks ago, I was at a conference where representatives of Daimler Chrysler Trucks was talking, and he was saying, well, we are now working on our kind of the big factories, and by 2025 we will produce only fuel cell trucks and electric trucks, and then they kind of run out of the factory. It's unstoppable. We cannot have only 1 or 2. We kind of switch our production line, and then we need hydrogen. So we have to take this decision. Same panel, ThyssenKrupp was saying, okay, we switch to green steel. We have to change the processes in our plant. And once we do, it'll be hydrogen. So make sure that we'll get it. And the consumers, consumers, I wanted to say, not customers. Well, it doesn't matter. They also demanded, so just one example, DHL has now a system of attributing any clean fuel or net zero investment to individual customers. There are more customers, people, clients like us, but also intermediate that demand net zero across the entire value chain. So there are all those kind of forces that help us give the right kind of incentives to the market. That's for demand. So that I'm quite hopeful. What about the infrastructure? This again is Europe-centric. You replace it with North Carolina, which I'm not too familiar with. So what Dagmara also talk about are the big connectors. We will be able in Europe to produce, this is the goal now, by 2030, 10 million tons, which is a very ambitious goal. Let's see if we are managing, but the rest shall come from our neighboring countries, mostly Northern Africa and the Gulf countries, and the most the cheapest way of transporting it would be by pipeline. There are existing pipelines from Morocco, Algeria to Spain, and from Algeria to Italy, which one could retrofit or build anew. And there's a discussion of building a pipeline from the Arab Peninsula to Europe. I don't know how long that will take, how serious it is, but this is kind of in the big discussion. And we also have to invest a lot in the distribution within Europe. So most of the transport at the beginning will be by ship, going to the big harbors, which are all in the northern part of Europe, Rotterdam or Hamburg or Antwerpen. And there you have to have the landing facilities, you have the ammonia crackers, you have to have the storage, you have to then be able to distribute it to the market where it is then used. This is it's a huge endeavor, and we have to start now. Another infrastructure way, kind of in inverted commas, is how we work together. And there are more and more bilateral partnerships. And did I read yesterday that California and Japan have signed a memorandum of understanding? I think I just saw the headline. And they are this already busy, but there are by now many more of those lines across the globe of countries working together. And I think it's absolutely needed. We have to remind ourselves that we are building a market that doesn't exist yet. There is hardly any trade on hydrogen, and we talk a lot about it. So we kind of, in our mind, it's already happening, but in real life it isn't. So it is absolutely necessary that we work together, jointly reduce the costs of hydrogen, innovate, and so on the forth. And define the rules of the game. And the best platforms for these are the multilateral fora. Some say there are too many, they may duplicate, but it's on the positive side very great that they do work and that we debate. And if you are interested in any of these fora, we can discuss later on, because I'm running out of time. I have 1 minute. What I want to highlight as under the heading technology and innovation is that currently hydrogen is used by a few industries, but it's not yet really embedded, integrated in our economy. So one way of doing that are the hydrogen valleys. And I do know that in the US, you also want to build 3 or 4 hydrogen valleys. And this is just one example of many that we have in the West Coast in Germany, where you have an offshore wind farm, which at the beginning is very small, 50 megawatts, which then be increased to 750, which provides the electricity to the electrolyzer that will then give access heat to industries nearby. And the hydrogen, together with the CO2 that comes from a cement factory, is then used for the methanol synthesis, which goes to a refinery, which produces kerosene for the airport of Hamburg. The point is here, okay, it's all connected. We learn a lot how this laboratory, real life laboratory, how we call it, works. And from this, we can hopefully then build up and make it bigger and see how a hydrogen economy could look like. Another sorry for rushing, guys. No, I know it's insane, but it's 10 o'clock. So another very important point for innovation, in my view, is critical raw materials. This is not for hydrogen, it's for energy transition in general. And for the raw materials that are critical, currently at least, for building all our wind parks and solar and electrolyzers and so on the forth, I put here the 3 most dominant producing countries. And if you compare that with oil and gas, which at least in my mind is heavily concentrated, it looks very different. Of course, this has Russia and things have changed, but the point is we have a huge concentration, and we have to make sure that we have enough raw material to get the energy transition. Just saying, without kind of pointing fingers or anything, there's one country who saw that coming early on and they got organized. This is China. I could have asked the audience if you guessed which it was. They are very well placed in processing of the rare material. And I think we have to organize ourselves and be sure that we have access to this. So last point on certification and standards, and I go very quick here because my point here is a very simple one, and like Mara already said it, we need clear rules how an international trade of hydrogen should work. And currently there are many different standards, certification schemes in many countries. And I put 6 because the slide is small. I could put 10 or 15. And they all differ. And this is my main message here. No? So some are voluntary, some are clear regulations. Some are a mass balance scheme, which means you have to bring the hydrogen or the derivative to the place of use. Some have a book and claim. So it's produced somewhere, it's used somewhere, but I pay the premium and I get the certificate and I can allocate that to my quota. How are the greenhouse gas emissions be calculated? There are different scopes, well-to-wheel, well-to-gate, easily explained by a picture. You see it only from the electricity generation up to the electrolyzer. When you have the hydrogen, that would be well-to-gate, or do you go well-to-wheel? So from the electricity to the electrolyzer, transport to the fueling station, up to the car or the plane, that would be well-to-wheel. And that is only for transport. So we have different system for every sector that we have, different for cement, different for green steel, different for fertilizers with green ammonia. That gives a lot of uncertainty, of course, for producers that may wish to provide their products to different markets with different rules. And sustainability criteria, in some they are included, in some they are only mentioned, so that is also confusing. Same for this question, what is actually green, what is low carbon, what is clean? We operate with these names, they kind of mean the same and not, and they are all calculated differently. So this is not about the figures that are standing here. This is just to convey the point. Every country has a different reduction target, has a different reference baseline, has a different threshold, and may also have a different way, a methodology of calculating it. There's a lot of work on the global level to harmonizing it, but this is super important to have clear rules, because the more uncertainty we have in the market, the less dynamic it will be, very obviously. So I want to conclude. These are my messages that I want to convey. In the presentation that I will share, I will have nice sentences for each of those that explain it further. If there's anything, send me an email and we discuss, or in the break. And I don't know if we have time now because it's already 5 past. Thank you.